NYU has gone nuts. For the last year, we have seen campus protests. Since October 7th, universities and colleges all around the country have been sites of protests, radical resistance. We've seen encampments, we've seen protests, we've seen uprisings, we've seen walkouts, and it's been an attempt to hold the United States accountable and the U.S. university system accountable for its role, its complicity in the genocide that's taking place in Gaza right now, and that has been ongoing. One of the things we saw in the aftermath of the spring protests, and there were so many of them, was the implementation of policies over the summer that would kind of sneak up on you, right? Like the kids go home for the summer is the idea, and they don't know what's going on because they're home. This is the idea. I'm not saying it's true, but this is how they think. The university thinks, right? That the kids will go home and they'll come back and all those protest areas will be gone. All those encampments will be criminalized. All the resistance will be dismissed. Even the faculty who support and maybe even enable some of this stuff, they'll also be knocked out the box. That's the theory. Well, that's exactly what NYU is banking on, because they shared their new code of conduct last week, right as the students, I shouldn't call them kids, right as the students are coming back to campus. Now, the logic of the policy is that the policy will curtail bigotry. We are going to have an unequivocal campus code of conduct that will prevent students from being mistreated, that will prevent faculty from being mistreated, that will create safety on the campus. Sounds good. Sounds good. But as always, the devil is in the details. As always, the devil is in the details. So when you actually look at them details, when you actually go to New York University's code of conduct, which you know I did, because night school, we do our homework. Let's take a gander, shall we? NYU's guidance and expectations on student conduct. You know, they have the whole bit about, you know, our academic mission. We want to pursue our our academic aims. We want to make this a place of teaching, learning, and scholarship. We want to do all the things that, again, make sense, right? They all make sense. We want a great campus climate. We want a great campus environment. Who doesn't, right? That's the point, right? But let's skip to the chase. Let's skip to the chase on the NDAH policy, right? The non-discrimination and anti-harassment policy. Again, a university should have a non-discrimination and anti-harassment policy, or an NDAH. Nobody disagrees with that. Let's be very clear, because later on, I don't want y'all coming up in here saying Mark disagrees with an anti-discrimination policy, because he don't. He don't. However, let's keep going. Sorry, this is not the most user-friendly website, which, again, not a coincidence. They don't want it to be user-friendly. It's part of the hustle, y'all. So they said some examples of activities that will violate the NDAH policy, which is intended to curtail what? Racism, colorism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, xenophobia, sexism, transphobia, ableism, and other forms of bigotry involving protected characteristics covered by the policy. Let's be clear. Racism, colorism, anti-Semitism, Islam, so things that are related to one's identity, ethnicity, religion, race, gender identity, sexual identity, ability status. These are things that are very clearly protected, and things that you can be in violation of the university policy if you discriminate based on these things. In other words, I can say, I don't want you in my class because you've been a disruption. I can say, I don't want you to join this club because you have a low GPA. I cannot say, I don't want you in my class because you are from Pakistan. I can't say, I don't want you to join this club because you are transgender, etc., etc., etc. So These are the examples they give you: refusing to work with each other, targeting someone for harassment or intimidation, ostracism based on identity, use of dissemination of tropes about protected groups, cause for genocide of an entire people or group. Very interesting example. That call for genocide thing is purely an anti-Palestinian thing. And again, I'm not saying Palestinians are calling for genocide. I'm saying that Palestinian language of resistance has often been smeared and misrepresented as a call for genocide. So they put that in there so that when you say free Palestine from the river to the sea, they can now pretend that you're calling for genocide. It was the substance of those congressional hearings last year. But I'll keep going because that's not the point today. You see all this stuff, and then they say this. This is the heart of the matter. Using code words like Zionist does not eliminate the possibility that your speech violates the NDAH policy. For many Jewish people, Zionism is a part of their Jewish identity. Speech and conduct that would violate the NDAH if targeting Jewish or Israeli people can also violate the NDAH if directed towards Zionists. Wow. For example, excluding Zionists from an open event, calling for the death of Zionists, applying as no Zionist litmus test for participation in any NYU activity, using or disseminating tropes, stereotypes, and conspiracies about Zionists, e.g. Zionists control the media, demanding a person who is perceived to be Jewish or Israeli to state a position on Israel or Zionism, minimizing or denying the Holocaust, or invoking Holocaust imagery or symbols to harass or discriminate. Something fascinating has just happened here. And I want y'all to really pay careful attention to what just happened here. The NYU language has been carefully crafted. It's been crafted in a way that conflates Zionism and anti-Semitism at the same time as saying they're different and both problematic as a site of discrimination. So let me back up and make it plain for you. Let me make it plain for you. What they're saying, what they're doing is they're saying, look, obviously you can't be discriminatory toward Jews. Obviously you can't harass Jews or Muslims or white people or black people or women or trans folk or cis folk, or right? That's the obvious part. That's what they're saying, right? And I agree, it's obvious. You shouldn't harass or discriminate against anybody. But then they're saying, well, Zionism sometimes is just a code for Jew. And this is something that many Zionists argue, and that many liberal Zionists have argued, and people like Richie Torres, right? And what they're basically saying is, for a lot of Jews, in fact, they literally say for some Jews, Zionism is part of their Judaism. Well, that might be true, but that doesn't make it okay. That would be like me saying that for some Christians, colonizing or conquest was part of their faith system. They believed that Jesus or God wanted them to go around the world conquering Muslims and converting Jews and slaying atheists, or whatever the thing you might want to say. All those things are not good things. But if I say that something is central to my faith or my identity, right? Somebody might say, as a white person, I believe manifest destiny is part of my identity as a white person or as a European. I believe that this is my work. This is my call. Does that mean then that if I reject that from you, I'm rejecting your whiteness because you're attaching your whiteness or your maleness or your straightness or your Muslimness or your Christianness or your Jewishness or your whateverness to something that's problematic? No, we have a right to critique that. And it's not Zionism as such. Zionism has become the shorthand for a bigger conversation, which is not about Zionism in an abstract ideal. It's about political Zionism. It's about the belief that Israel has a right to function as a ethno-state that gives superior rights, privileges, freedoms, access, etc., to Jews over non-Jews. It's about saying it's about normalizing apartheid and settler colonialism. That's what political Zionism is. We're not talking about cultural Zionism. We're not talking about spiritual Zionism. We're not talking about religious Zionism. Those things might be central to your Jewishness. And for some people, they tie their Jewish identity to political Zionism. That might be every religion, every faith, every ethnicity has those dynamics. Jews should not be singled out for this. They should not be isolated for this. They should not be criticized for this at the expense of everybody else. No, anybody who's engaged in a political act or a social act that is harmful to other people should be criticized. I have no issue with Jewish people. None of us should have an issue with Jewish people. What we have an issue with is the state of Israel's actions as a nation state. And as a nation state, Israel is functioning in a way that actually doesn't represent the beauty and the justice focus and the dignity and the extraordinariness of Judaism. Israel's not about that. We're talking about the nation state. And so what the NYU statement is doing is conflating those two things quite intentionally by trying to make me believe that because some people attach Zionism to their Jewish identity, that all of a sudden makes it untouchable, right? Now, some of these things on the list should be on the list. Let me be clear about that. Calling for the death of Zionists, yeah, I get why on campus somebody identifies as a Zionist, you can't call for their death. You shouldn't be calling for their death at all. Applying a no Zionist litmus test for participation in any NYU activity, I disagree with that. Here's why. If someone were to say that they believe that women are not qualified to do math or to do science, technology, to do STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, math, whatever, right? If someone were to say that, I don't believe that women are as smart as men and cannot do this stuff. It would be not unreasonable to say that the person who believes that shouldn't join the Young Feminist Club. Or they shouldn't be allowed to, they should be able to go to an activity for feminists. They shouldn't be locked out of the room. They paid the tuition. But maybe you shouldn't be on the panel, right? Like maybe that's okay to say you should be on the panel, right? There are boundaries for what should and should not be permissible. Now, again, if you're part of the campus community, you should be allowed to be part of a democratic process, even if I disagree with you 1,000%. But saying that that Zionists can never be a litmus test for anything. If I were Muslim and I were an undergrad and I wanted to run for president of the Young Christian Organization or the Young Jewish Organization, maybe it'd be reasonable to say, hey, you can't run for our office here unless you're of the same religion. Using or disseminating tropes. This is an interesting one. Using or disseminating tropes. Again, this is where they're conflating Judaism and Zionism. The tropes that get disseminated aren't about Zionists, they're about Jews. And they're anti-Semitic and should be rejected. Anti-Semitic tropes should always be rejected. And anyone who is caught trafficking in them, whether you made them, whether you shared them, whether you, whatever, you should be held accountable. Stereotypes and conspiracies about Zionists, e.g. Zionists control the media. Again, typically the conspiracy theory, the cabal narrative, the controlling images narrative, where you say the Jews are control the media, that they're conspiratorial, that they work behind the scenes. All these things are about Jewish people. And again, they are anti-Semitic tropes. They are deeply dangerous, deeply harmful, deeply problematic, and should be completely rejected. And anyone who traffics in them should be held accountable. Again, I agree. Minimizing or denying the Holocaust. Holocaust denial, Holocaust minimalization, all of that stuff is awful and deeply anti-Semitic. But no one is doing that to Zionists. They're doing that to Jews writ large. That's not a Zionist issue. But by mixing those two things together, it makes people think that somehow when you say Zionist, you really just mean Jew. And are there people in the world who may conflate those two things on purpose so that they can be anti-Semitic and polite company? I'm sure there's somebody in the world who does that. But that is not mainstream action. That is not mainstream thought. That is not even a reasonable minority of the people. In other words, when people are out in these streets critiquing Zionism, challenging Zionism, rejecting Zionism, they're doing so because Zionism as a political project has led to the dislocation, the dispossession, the cleansing the destruction, the removal, the erasure of Palestinian people for over 100 years. And that's what people are worried about. That's what people are talking about. We got to be honest about that. So NYU, Zionists should not be a protected class. Jews should be a protected class. Muslims should be a protected class. Women should be a protected class. There are lots of things that should be protected classes. But Zionism?